Regarding these epiphyses, there are different kinds of epiphyses. Pressure epiphysis, another is your traction epiphysis, another is your atavistic epiphysis, and aberrant epiphysis. Okay, so these are the 4 epiphyses that you have. Now, what is the importance of these epiphyses? You have pressure epiphyses. They are the epiphyses which there is weight transmission. There is a transmission of weight in those through those particular points. Okay, so for example, what would you say? In the lower limb, you know that the condyles, the lower end of the femur, you have the condyles. The upper end of the tibia, again you have condyles. These are areas where there is weight transmission, and these are always articular. Okay, these kind of epiphyses are called as a pressure epiphyses. They are areas where there is pressure and weight bearing. These will always be covered by a articular cartilage, and they will ossify quite early compared to the traction epiphyses. Okay, so at least this many points you have to know about pressure epiphyses. Traction epiphyses, what about it? When you say traction, it means it's something called as like pulling. Okay, traction means pulling. When you go to your clinics, you will see that for various conditions, sometimes there will be tractions will be kept so as to pull the bones apart. So how can I pull a bone? What is already attached to the bone? You have ligaments, you have tendons are already attached to the bone. Okay, so there are certain points where, or certain processes where there are muscles, a group of muscles attached, and these muscles are causing pulling of that area. For example, you have your tubercles of the humerus, upper end of humerus, you have in your femur, you have the trochanters. All these areas are places where you have traction by the muscle tendons. Okay, so these will grow and won't be articular. You won't have any articular cartilage covering these. They will not be responsible for weight transmission also, but you will have the muscle tendons being pulling these areas. These epiphyses which develop in these areas are called as traction epiphyses. We already said the examples, the trochanters of the femur and the tubercles of the humerus. Next one is atavistic epiphysis. When you are asked about atavistic epiphysis, the thing you have to know is phylogenetically these epiphyses were separate bones. That is, when you mean phylogenetically, it means that maybe in evolution, in lower animals, you see these as separate bones, or in evolution, initially they were separate bones and later on they got fused to another bone. Okay, so one of the first bones that you would have learned in your osteology is your scapula. Okay, and one of the processes, name processes that you have learned there was your coracoid process. Okay, you should remember coracoid process, coronoid process, conoid tubercle. Okay, in 3 important C's. Okay, if you are asked any one of them, you will be asked about the remaining 2. In which bone is it seen? What is the function? What are the attachments? Okay, so the coracoid process seen, that is an example of atavistic. That means it was a separate bone, the coracoid process in the scapula, but now it is seen attached to the scapula. It takes its blood supply from the scapula. So that is meant by atavistic epiphysis. Some textbooks would give something called as an aberrant. At least these 3 should be there. Now, if asked what is aberrant epiphysis, that is maybe not seen or seen in an abnormal position. So, for example, the upper end, or the head of the first metacarpal sometimes may have epiphysis that is your aberrant epiphysis. This is one of the classification of your epiphysis into pressure, traction, atavistic, aberrant epiphysis. There's one more classification which you should remember, and which very often students leave off. Okay, that is your, what do you mean by a simple epiphysis and a compound epiphysis? Simple epiphysis, I already told you, you have your epiphysis, you have your diaphysis, and in between you have your epiphyseal plate. Okay, so what happens is there is a fusion of the epiphysis with the epiphyseal plate. Okay, if there are multiple epiphyses at one end of a bone, each epiphysis will attach or fuse separately with a separate epiphyseal plate, that you are going to call it as a simple epiphysis, because each epiphysis has a separate epiphyseal plate. Okay, an example for that would be the upper end of the femur, where you have the head of the femur is there, the trochanters are there, all these are, you have various epiphyses there. That is called as a simple epiphysis, where each epiphysis has a separate epiphyseal plate and fuses there. When you say compound epiphysis, again an end of a bone where you have multiple epiphyses, but there is only a single epiphyseal plate. So what should they do? First of all, each epiphysis will fuse with each other, and then all of these will join to this epiphyseal plate. Okay, that is called as a compound epiphysis. We said this is the upper end of femur. So what would this be? The upper end of humerus is an example for compound epiphysis. So that is what you have to write when asked about your epiphysis.